Before we begin, I want you to think about a question for a second. What if you had eternal life? Just think about it. You'll live to see everyone crumble to dust and blow away. Everyone and everything you know and care about will be gone. Now, Frieren Beyond Journey's End is the most recent anime to explore this idea. The story literally begins right when the hero's journey ends, and they all return to the royal capital to celebrate the Demon King's defeat. We have Hader, the priest, Eisen, the dwarf warrior, Himmel, the hero, and Frieren, the elf mage. These four have just returned from their 10-year-long quest to defeat the Demon King. As you can probably imagine, this was an adventure of a lifetime, but not for all of them. While Himmel, Eisen, and Hader just want to relax and chill for the rest of their lives, Frieren is different. You see, she's an elf, and elves live for much longer than humans. Frieren's over 1,000 years old, and she still looks like a cute petite girl. Of course, this also means that 10 years are nothing for her. That's why, unlike her peers, she decides to set out once again. She loves magic spells, and so she's gonna learn some more of them. Though before she leaves, the hero's party gathers together to watch the meteor shower that only happens every 50 years. She's a bit disappointed by the sight and promises them that she'll take them to a better spot for when they watch the next meteor shower together. Frieren resumes her journey, and the flow of time continues. A couple of minutes later, and it's already been 50 years. Himmel's now an old man, and the same goes for Hader. Although Eisen still looks the same as he did 50 years ago, which makes sense. He is a dwarf, so he'll still be around for another century or so, at the very least. Anyway, Himmel gives Frieren the dragon horn he was holding in his possession, and the gang later has their one last adventure. Frieren takes them to a nice spot where they gaze upon the meteor shower. It's a peaceful, somewhat melancholic, and overly majestic moment. Sadly, Himmel doesn't last long. He passes away soon after this trip. At the funeral, something suddenly hits Frieren. Even though she knew that a human's lifespan was short, why didn't she ever think about getting to know him better? Frieren sheds tears as she experiences this regret. She makes a conscious decision that from now on, she's going to try to get to know humans better. Fast forward to 20 years later, Frieren visits Hader. She encounters a cute little purple-haired girl. Her name is Fern, and she's Hader's adoptive daughter. Speaking of Hader, he's quite old at this point. You can tell he's running out of time, and maybe that's why he asks Frieren to take Fern with her. Frieren is not so sure about this because a little girl like her will just get in her way. Well, Hader drops the topic for the time being and asks Frieren for a favor. He wants her to decipher an ancient immortality grimoire for him, and he requests her to train Fern in the meantime. Of course, Frieren accepts his request. She starts studying the grimoire while also training Fern in her spare time. This continues for the next 4 years. Hader's health also continues to deteriorate. He's eventually bedridden and knows that his time has come. Fern, on the other hand, starts taking her training more seriously than ever before. It's like she has something to prove to Hader, and she also knows that they're running out of time. As the story goes, Fern's parents were killed and her village was destroyed during a war. She was on the verge of taking her own life when Hader saved her. That's why she now seeks to show Hader that even after he's gone, she'll be able to survive on her own. By the way, how's that immortality grimoire thing going? Well, apparently it was a fraud. Hader played our girl. He knew that there was no immortality secret in the grimoire, he just wanted Frieren to stick around long enough to turn Fern into a proper mage. So he asks Frieren the same thing as he did 4 years ago. Would she take Fern with her on her journey? Of course, Frieren has no reason to refuse, but she starts crying because she wants the two of them to have a proper farewell. We see Fern and Hader smiling and talking to each other, and as the story goes on, Hader passes away. Fern accompanies Frieren on her travels. It takes Fern some time to get used to Frieren's silliness, but the two of them make a good team. One day, they come across a statue of the hero in some random village, and Frieren decides to decorate it with a certain flower. We're talking about the blue moon weed, a flower that's actually native to Himmel's village, that being the hero that Frieren once traveled with. It's going to be a challenge though, because the flower's been extinct in this region. Frieren still decides to do something about it, which makes Fern wonder if this is a good use of their time, and well, let's just say that the one who inspired this silly little hobby in her was the hero himself. She gathers spells because it's a good way to counter the apathy caused by her extraordinarily long lifespan. It takes 6 months, but the girls find some blue moon weed in a rat nest. Frieren then uses her magic to turn that little bit into an entire field of blue moon weed. The hero's statue is wonderfully decorated. As for Fern, she learns something important. It isn't just about magic. Heck, it doesn't even matter what it is. The important thing is to have passion Following this, Fern notices Frieren acting a little suspicious, so she decides to follow her around town. She notices her acting sus at some local shops. So what's up? What's Frieren doing? Well, nothing much. She was just looking for a gift for Fern because it's her 16th birthday. Frieren gives her a hair ornament. As expected, Fern is delighted and tells Frieren that this present has given her overwhelming bliss. The journey continues and the girls visit places Frieren had visited together with her party over 80 years ago. They reach a village where Frieren had sealed the demon of corruption. Back then, she wasn't strong enough to take it out, but she's stronger than before. Plus, she also learns from the village elder that Himmel has been checking up on the demon's seal every year till his death. Turns out, Himmel sort of knew that Frieren would show up to defeat it before the seal came undone. And that's what happens. She counters the demon's usual killing spell and just straight up obliterates it. Frieren also recalls how the village elder was just a little boy 8 years ago. I guess she started to feel a little closer to humans. Next up, the girls pick up the job of cleaning a beach for the New Year's festival. They'll be given the legendary Mage Flamme's grimoire in return, which gets Frieren's attention. The book is a fake though, but the girls still go ahead and clear up the beach. They somehow manage to finish it all up right in time before the festival. Though when the time comes for the first sunrise of the year, Frieren is sleepy and drowsy. If it weren't for Fern waking her up and dragging her to the scene, she would have missed the sunrise. By the way, she did miss it when she was here last time with her party. Himmel and the others were disappointed in her, but the thing is, Frieren is the type who'd rather sleep in than go see the sunrise. But right here, as the sun arises and Frieren notices the vibrant smile on Fern's face, she realizes something important. She realizes the value of shared experiences. The reason her friends were upset was because they wanted to see the sunrise with her. Though speaking of her friends, the girls visit Eisen. It's been 28 years since someone passed away, 28 years since they last saw each other. Apparently Eisen was keeping up with Hader, so he knew that Frieren had taken Fern as her apprentice. Anyway, she asks Eisen if she can do anything for him, and he mentions a certain grimoire. He knows the whereabouts of Flamme's grimoire, and he wants Frieren's help in searching for it. As for what this grimoire is about, let's just say that it gives one the chance to talk to the dead. And why does Eisen want said grimoire? Well, he wants it for Frieren. He knows that she regrets not being able to have a proper final conversation with Himmel, and that's why he wants her to use the grimoire to talk to him. By the way, who is Flamme? She's a legendary mage who mentored Frieren 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, she was a human, so she didn't get to live as long as Frieren. However, there was one thing she once told Frieren. She told her that if she ever feels regretful about something, she should come visit her home. Frieren, Eisen, and Fern use this as their lead and succeed in discovering the grimoire. Although if she wants to speak to the dead, Frieren will have to go all the way to Ariol, which is a place that exists at the northernmost point of the continent. It's said that this is where all souls ultimately end up. The Demon King's castle was also there. For now, the gang's on their way back to Eisen's home when he expresses how happy he is that Frieren has started to change. He also compliments her for being such a good mentor to Fern. When they drop him off, Frieren asks if he'd like to accompany them on their journey into Ariol. Unfortunately, the dwarf warrior feels like he's too old for another long adventure. He still takes a moment to reminisce about their 10-year-long quest to reach and defeat the Demon King, though. Of course, it's also going to take 10 years this time as well, but then again, 10 years isn't even 1% of Frieren's lifespan. The same cannot be said about Fern, though. And it's not like she minds traveling with Frieren. The story continues, and the girls come across a village where people keep coming across their dead relatives. They then disappear after those paranormal encounters. So what's going on? Frieren explains that it must be the work of a creature called Eisen. They use illusion magic to make you lower your guard, and that's it. You're never seen again. Though to be fair, it's not that hard to break out of the illusion. You just need to attack the ghost, even if it looks like someone you love. Fern sees Hader's ghost, while Frieren sees Himmel's ghost. As expected, Fern wasn't ready for it. Luckily, Frieren was aware of what's going on. In fact, she's had enough time to recall how in the past, she used to see the illusion of her mentor, but now it's Himmel. Himmel's ghost tells her to shoot, and with that, the creature's forced into revealing himself. Well, Fern steps in and obliterates it with her magic right there and then. Following this, the girls find a dragon's nest. Frieren is intrigued because there's a grimoire lying in that nest, but then again, someone needs to defeat the dragon first. And who is it that defeats the dragon? warriors, and as it turns out, Eisen's disciple is the local hero. He's a bit of a coward, though. Forget about slaying a dragon, he's never slain anything at all. His name is Stark, but, well, he's got no spark. However, Frieren points out that he's still Eisen's student, and yep, that's right. Stand proud, Stark, you are strong. I mean, he's able to slice up massive solid rocks, so he should be able to fight a dragon too. Yes, he may be afraid, but that's never stopped him from training his ass off. For the past 3 years, he's consistently swung his sword near a cliff, and by now, those swings have caused a large gouge in the mountain. Fern tries to talk him out of his fear. She explains how she felt the same when she fought her first monster. Frieren literally just led her there and refused to help, which is why, as she got herself backed into a corner, Fern's body realized that the only thing left to do is rely on her own strength. She now tells Stark the same thing. He has to rely on his own strength. The time comes for the battle, and as Stark quivers and shakes in fear, Frieren points out that his master Eisen used to quake in his boots too. This calms Stark down a little, and looks like there was never any need to worry at all, because Stark is able to slay the dragon as if it's the most natural thing in the world. He does it without needing Frieren's help. Yep, the hero gets the job done. He bids farewell to the villagers and joins Frieren's party. The journey continues and they reach the city of Wall, but there's a problem. They can't go any further because no one's allowed to pass through the next checkpoint. It's because of some monsters, which is why nobody knows when the situation will change either. It could take up to 2 years for all we know. Well, fine by Frieren. She'll just study some magic in the city then. Stark isn't so amused though. He wants the adventure to continue instead of waiting around, because his goal is to one day return to Eisen and tell him all about the badass things he's going to do during his adventure. He has a long conversation about this with Fern, and he also wonders if they could just fly over the checkpoint. Going back to Frieren, the two of them catch her acting silly. Apparently she's trying to avoid the guards because she thinks she's in trouble, but it's the exact opposite. The head of the city recognizes her as one of the heroes who took down the Demon King, and with that, Frieren and her party are allowed to pass through the checkpoint. They literally get a hero send-off from the citizens of this city. I guess Stark should be pleased because, hey, is there a better way to start your adventure? Anyway, so the journey to the north continues. The trio helps in clearing up a roadblock, and as they're in the middle of it, Fern mentions how she's never seen any elf other than Frieren, which is a good point. And so Frieren explains that their race has declined quite a lot. In fact, the last time she saw an elf was 400 years ago. Next, they reach a village where the locals are about to celebrate the Day of Liberation. We see statues of Frieren and the others, and this makes Frieren remember how Himmel once told her that even far into the future, these statues will always remind her of her friends. She'll never be alone. Moving on, the trio is walking around in a city when Frieren suddenly notices some demons out in the open. Without thinking, she attacks them and ends up in jail, because they were actually peace envoys. Fern and Stark later pay her a visit and explain what they've learned about the situation. There is a war going on, and the demons were sent by Aura, one of the 7 mages of destruction. She sent them for peace talks. However, Frieren is not amused. She declares that no matter what, demons can never be reasoned with. Even if they learn human language, their goal is always to deceive and destroy. That's all there is to it. And it is exactly as it says. The peace talks are a total hoax. The only reason demons are in the city is to make the forces lower their defenses. They're here to create an opportunity for Aura to destroy the city in one go. Meanwhile, a random demon pulls up to jail to take Frieren's life, but she easily gets rid of him and then escapes jail. By this point, the demons have taken Granite hostage. He is the city's Graf. On the other hand, Fern and Stark run into Frieren as she's on her way to take Aura down. They want her to help them in taking care of the envoys, but she tells them that they'll have to deal with those demons themselves. Yes, Frieren trusts Fern and Stark with taking care of the envoys while she goes to deal with Aura. Conveniently, Fern and Stark manage to rescue Granite, and in doing so, the envoy also realizes something important. He realizes that she is here. And who are we talking about? The mage who's killed the most number of demons in history, Frieren the Slayer. Going back to Granite, he tells Fern and Stark about Aura's weapon of mass destruction. It's called Scales of Obedience, and it allows her to control anyone with less mana than her. And let me tell you that there are not many people who have more mana than her, which is why she's used the weapon to gather a stupid number of puppet soldiers who always follow her orders. Frieren's in the middle of engaging with said army. While they're in the city, Fern and Stark are attacked by the demon envoys. Fern fights Lugner while Stark takes on lineae, but it's just as Frieren expected. The demons are no match for Fern and Stark. When Stark notices that lineae is copying Eisen's fighting style, he lets himself get hit and then kills her by igniting a literal lightning strike with his axe. Then there's Fern. She keeps spamming basic offensive magic again and again and again and again. The demon gets so confused when she doesn't run out of her mana even after so many spells. What the hell's going on? It takes him a bit, but he ultimately realizes what's going on. You see, Fern never showed her true mana. She's been suppressing it all this time. This allows her to catch the demon off guard and finish him off. She obliterates Lugner. The story then takes us 1,000 years back into the past. It takes us straight to when the legendary mage, Flamme, first met Frieren. Frieren's village had been destroyed. She was the only survivor. Flamme saved her and also defeated the demon general who destroyed her village. Later, she taught Frieren about mana suppression. She taught Frieren that demons are always arrogant and overconfident. They can't even fathom the idea of suppressing their own mana, which is why if you suppress your mana, you can easily catch them off guard and win. That's where Frieren learned about mana suppression. She's been suppressing her mana all her life, and she made sure to teach it to Fern too. Going back to the battle between Aura and Frieren, Aura declares that she's been a demon for 500 years. She uses the scales of obedience, but imagine her surprise when Frieren reveals her true power. The Scales of Obedience recognize Frieren as the superior, and Aura is left with no choice but to follow her command. Frieren acts as if she's Laylock from Code Geass and tells Aura to, well, game end herself. Aura follows through, and the battle ends. Frieren prays for all the victims of Aura's puppet army and also compliments Fern and Stark for defeating their opponents. Garnet holds a feast, and with that, the trio resumes their journey. They're headed to a magic city called Oberest. Goal is to get a mage certification, otherwise they won't be allowed to travel to the northern plateau. Anyway, as they're on their way, they get stuck in a blizzard and have to take refuge in an emergency cabin. Someone's already there though, and it's a half-naked monk. But more importantly, he is an elf. The man's name is Kraft, and looks like he's the extroverted type because he just casually sleeps with Stark in the same bed and shirtless. Alright, so the blizzard is constant and harsh. They have no choice but to wait until the winter is over. It takes 6 months before they're ready to set out again. Kraft opens up to Frieren about how he's lost his companions and how there probably isn't anyone who even remembers him anymore. Everyone who knew about him and his accomplishments is already gone. He finds solace in praying to the goddess of creation so that when he's finally off to the next world, he'll have at least someone who will acknowledge him. Of course, Kraft asks Frieren about her past as well and offers to acknowledge her for all the things she's done, from one elf to another. Though this just makes Frieren recall how Hader once told her the same thing. Kraft is amused. He reminds Frieren to cherish her companions, and with that, the trio and Kraft part ways. Who knows, maybe Kraft and Frieren will meet again one day. Now Frieren and the others stop at a village of the Sword to take care of the monsters gathering around the legendary sword. The village chief is a young lady who's frustrated with Frieren for taking so long to return and take care of the monsters. Anyway, so about this sword. It's said that the hero was the first one to extract this legendary sword. Of course, that's what Stark thinks, but the reality is often disappointing. Truth be told, Himmel was never able to extract the blade either. This is concerning because the only one who can extract the legendary hero sword is supposed to be the true hero. What does this mean? Was Himmel a fraud? Well, Frieren explains that even though he couldn't extract the sword, he still declared that he would defeat the Demon King and restore peace and harmony to the world. And as the story goes, he did in fact save the world. I guess you are what you say you are. Moving on, it's Stark's 18th birthday. Fern asks Frieren if she's gotten a present for Stark, and although we get some nice Frieren fan service, she hasn't really thought about the present. In fact, she literally just pulls out a drug that melts clothes and tells Fern that she'll give this to Stark. Apparently boys like that sort of thing. Well, Fern grabs the drug and drops it all over Frieren, hence in turn melting her pajamas. She then steps out and asks Stark about what he wants for a present. Unfortunately, he has no idea. He comes from a family of warriors after all. He's never experienced things like birthdays. Maybe it was because his family was disappointed in him. Well, he's also kind of disappointed in himself because he once ran away from a monster attack. That day, a demon took his brother's life. Well, be that as it may, Fern helps Stark and the two of them choose a silver bracelet as his birthday present. And it's not just this. When they finally return to the inn, they're greeted with a sight of Frieren cooking up some Hamburg steaks. This intrigues Stark, and as Frieren explains, Hamburg steaks are actually a symbol of recognition. She tells Stark that Eisen used used to make them, and how they're a symbol that recognizes that you've been doing your best. Suddenly, Stark recalls something. He recalls how his dear old brother used to cook him Hamburg steaks on his birthdays. So that's what that was about. Huh. He also recalls how he didn't just run away from the monster attack back then. It was his brother who told him to run. His brother gave up his own life to defend him. Stark gets a little sentimental as he finds solace in the love his brother once had for him. The journey resumes, and Frieren finds a priest getting sucked in by a bottomless quagmire. She's observing from a safe distance instead of lending him a hand because she wants to recall the proper magic spell that pulls you out of a pit. Whatever. Frieren saves the guy. And when Stark gets himself bitten by a poisonous snake, the priest returns the favor by healing Stark. He does it with just a little touch, and his older brother reveals that he has a natural talent for healing spells. The man's name is Sein, and his brother formally requests Frieren to take Sein with her. It looks like he was once an aspiring adventurer, but ended up abandoning that dream. Even when his best friend was about to leave on an adventure 10 years ago, he turned down his invitation. So why did Sein just give up on his dream? Frieren is curious, not just because of the reason, but also because she was the same. When the hero's party asked her to join them, she didn't feel like doing it either. Well, Frieren decides that she's going to take him with them. But as expected, Sein is a priest, and therefore he cannot be influenced so easily. They ask his brother about any ideas on what Sein likes, and he just tells them that he likes older ladies. So they try to present Frieren as a mature lady. In fact, Frieren even goes as far as to give Sein a blow kiss, but the guy is just not interested. Looks like he wants the ara type of mature lady. Frieren reminds him of his best friend, but he simply replies that his best friend was supposed to return to the village in 3 years. It's been 10. The guy's probably already dead. Well, Frieren explains that if he keeps living in the past and keeps making excuses, he's going to regret it. This causes Sein to finally tell the truth about why he wants to stay in his village. It's because of his brother. There was a time when his brother declined an opportunity to move to the Holy City just for his sake. Now he wants to return the favor, or something stupid like that. And the next thing you know, Sein gets slapped in the face by his cool brother. It's the first time his brother has ever slapped, but as expected, some tough love was needed. Sein finally stops being stubborn over stupid stuff and braces himself to be an adventurer. Although his goal is different. He's in it to find his best friend. That's why he'll only be accompanying them until then. Moving on, we have another birthday. This time it's Fern, who's turned 18. She doesn't seem like she's in a good mood though. She's pouting all over the place. So I wonder what happened. Of course, it's all Stark's fault. He forgot to get a birthday present for her, and you bet she's mad. Sadly, though, it wasn't even that deep. He just didn't know what to get her and thought they should pick out a present for her together. Sein tells Fern that she was too harsh on the poor guy, and she kinda understands. Fern realizes her mistake and prepares to apologize to Stark, but when she approaches him, he beats her at her own game. Yep, he apologizes first and the two of them make up. They then choose a present for Fern together. Frieren then compliments Sein on conducting such good diplomacy between Fern and Stark. It's like, finally, we have an adult in the group. Next up, the gang is traveling on a wagon when Frieren recognizes the symbol on Fern's new bracelet. Turns out that what Stark got her has the same emblem as the ring Himmel gave her back during the hero's journey. She immediately starts looking for the ring, and guess what? A flying type Pokemon appears, snatches their wagon, and just flies away. One moment they're on the road, next moment they're flying. Frieren handles the monster, and although the fall is scary, all of them survive. All of them except the wagon. Unfortunately, Frieren then loses her ring. Now, when Sein notices Fern's bracelet, he explains that the emblem is the mirror Lotus. And guess what? In the language of flowers, mirror Lotus means eternal love. Sein obviously compliments Stark for being such a straightforward man. I mean, who knew Stark was such a player? But he ruins it right there and then by asking Fern if she'd like something else. Turns out neither Fern nor Stark knew about the meaning of the emblem. Going back to Frieren, she's having trouble finding the ring. She and Fern ask the merchant about it while the boys repair the wagon. Luckily, the merchant had a spell which lets you track down lost items. That's gotta come in handy. Frieren uses the spell and easily finds the ring. She then recalls the time when Himmel got her the ring. It was her who chose it, but she didn't know the meaning. But looking back, Himmel must have known, because the way he slipped that ring on her finger was exactly as though he knew what it meant. I mean, come on. If you were gonna show this scene to someone who hadn't seen Frieren yet, they'd think that the blue-haired guy is proposing to the white-haired lady. let's be honest. The gang then rolls up to yet another weird village. This one's a bit creepy because everyone's been knocked out cold. They're all just randomly asleep, probably because of some sleeping curse. Fern and Stark fall victim to the curse as well. Heck, even Frieren can't avoid falling asleep. The only one still awake and active is Sein. Well, he's a priest, after all. Ultimately, he finds the monster, but it's a very tricky situation. You have to pierce through the monster's core, otherwise he'll just send your attack right back at you. Sein can wake Frieren up for 5 seconds, but if she doesn't attack the right spot, her attack would just be deflected right back at her. Still, the guy chooses to trust Frieren. He uses his healing magic to wake her up for 5 seconds, but by the time he tells her to attack the core, she's already launched her attack. Nothing to worry about though, her attack pierces straight through the core. The villagers thank Frieren's party, and Sein is delighted because one of them was a mature, older lady. Anyway, the story continues, and it looks like a noble is interested in Stark's body. Of course, Frieren isn't willing to go along with what the noble wants. However, when she realizes that they're broke and the noble will properly compensate them, Frieren gives in. But what's going on? Why is the noble interested in Stark's body? It's more like Stark resembles his son, and that's why he wants Stark to attend a soiree in his son's stead. Unfortunately, his son died in battle, but because their state's in a tricky situation, he wants to keep his people's morale high. Stark goes along with it. He and Fern both start learning the proper etiquette for the next couple of months, and soon, the day of the event arrives. It's pleasant, everyone's eyes are on Fern and Stark as they dance together, and overall, the thing concludes without any issues. The noble wonders if Stark is willing to stick around here. He knows how Stark's village was destroyed, and he wants to give him a place he can call home. But Stark explains that he already has a place to return to. They'll return to Eisen and tell him all about his adventure. Speaking of adventure, the gang stops by a village and meets one of Frieren's old friends. It's Old Man Vol. He's an elderly dwarf who keeps watch and protects the village from harm. He's been doing this for a long time. Even when Frieren was here with the hero's party 80 years ago, the old man was still sitting here keeping watch. That's some dedication. It's said that he's doing so in memory of his dear wife. She was a human. Frieren and Old Man Vol have a heart-to-heart conversation. He asks her if she remembers Himmel's face. Does she remember his voice? This annoys Frieren a little as she thinks that he's taking her for a fool, but what the old man says next just breaks your heart. He tells Frieren that he can't even recall his wife's face. He can't recall her voice, but he's still gonna continue protecting the village in her memory. He then asks Frieren about where she's headed, and when she mentions the Demon King's castle, he unironically says that one day, someone will definitely defeat that Demon King. This surprises Frieren a little because it looks like the old man has forgotten about how they already defeated the Demon King, but she just smiles and chooses not to correct him. She also laughs and tells him that he will carry his memory into the future. Moving on, the gang stops at another village where Sein asks the locals about the guerrilla warrior, and some of them mention that there's a stubborn old lady who can tell more about the guerrilla warrior. Soon enough, the gang visits the lady, and as expected, she is quite stubborn. She has them do all sorts of errands and then finally asks them to clean the statues of 2 heroes whose names and identities have faded away because of the winds of history. Surprisingly, one of the statues looks like Kraft. I guess he wasn't kidding when he said that nobody remembers anything about him. By the way, when Sein looks at the statues, it hits home for him. We learned that it was actually these statues that inspired him and his best friend to become adventurers. Guerrilla Warrior is his best friend's name, while his name is Goatee Priest. They decided on these silly adventure names because they didn't want to be forgotten, unlike the heroes these statues are built after. They clean up the statue nice and good, and the old lady reveals that Guerrilla Warrior was here as well. He also cleaned the statue, which is very good news because now Sein knows that his best friend is still alive. But then the granny tells them that the guerrilla warrior headed in the opposite direction as Outburst. Unfortunately, the time has come for Sein to make the choice. Should he go after his best friend or should he stick with Frieren and the others? It should be an easy choice, but it looks like they've all gotten a little attached to Sein and he's gotten attached to them. Coincidentally, there's a heavy snowstorm and they're stuck in the village for an entire month. This gives Sein plenty of time to decide what he wants to do. He also conducts diplomacy yet again by resolving another quarrel between Fern and Stark. She was angry because Stark touched her face, but it's not like she dislikes Stark, but more that she was a bit taken aback by his physical strength. Sein easily understands that neither Fern nor Stark hate each other. He helps them make up with each other. And later, as he's talking to Frieren, he comments on how the two should just date each other already, which is fair. I mean, it's because Fern and Stark adore each other that they get into such petty fights. Now, as the month ends, Sein decides that he'll go after his friend. After all, he doesn't want to live with any regrets. They bid farewell to each other and part ways. Sadly, this means that they no longer have a healer in their party, and the drawbacks become aware right away, because when Fern catches a cold, they have to be treated normally. Frieren and Stark take her to a tiny little village and let her recover. We also see a wholesome scene where Frieren is holding Fern's hand to make her feel better. It does get a little awkward though, because Fern doesn't want to be treated like a kid, but Frieren does whatever she wants. After Fern recovers, the party resumes their journey to Auburst. We then see Kraft save a rather sus girl from some bandits, but she appreciates him. He reveals that he was saving the bandits from her. He knew that she was going to kill them, so he stepped in to make them leave with just a beating. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. The girl's name is Ubel, and she's also going to take part in the first-class mage exam. By this point, Frieren's party is in the city of Auburst. They go to the association to register, and although it's a bit tricky because Frieren doesn't have anything that proves her status as a mage, she's allowed to register when they see an old badge she had with her. Both Fern and Frieren register for the exam. 2 months later, the exam takes place. There are going to be 3 stages, and this exam is a very big deal because only the absolute best can clear it. Starting with the first stage, the participants are randomly divided into teams of 3. Their goal is to capture a bird called Still by sunset the next day, but if any member of their party dies, they will be disqualified. And they also can't leave the boundaries of the assigned area, which is a little silly because the area has been covered with an impenetrable spell. Still, it's going to be tricky because Still can travel faster than the speed of sound. Now, Frieren's teammates are 2 girls named Lawine and Kane. They're childhood friends, and they are more chaotic than Fern and Stark in the sense that they fight all the time. Frieren's worried about how this is going to go, but when push comes to shove, the girls surprise Frieren by their nearly perfect teamwork. The Still manages to escape to their grasp though. Later at night, Frieren saves Kane from a monster and opens up to Frieren about how it was Lawine who helped her overcome her fear of scary things. On the other hand, Fern's party consists of that wild green-haired girl named Ubel and a smartass named Land. They have somehow already caught a Still. Going back to Frieren and the girls, they come up with a pretty elaborate plan to catch a Still and piss everyone else off at the same time. They freeze the lake and contaminate pretty much every pond of water to make sure the bird would come to the only pool of water that they have left uncontaminated. Here, Frieren will hide her mana and catch the bird using her monster binding magic. As expected, the other parties are pissed, but there's an old mage named Denkin who figures out Frieren's plan. He tells his party that they're going after Frieren's party. Meanwhile, Fern's party ends up in a full-scale battle with another party. Fern versus Era, Ubel versus Werble, and Land versus Scharf. As the battle rages, Frieren succeeds in capturing a Still. It's not over yet though, because Denkin's party is here to steal their bird. Fern easily defeats Air with her remarkably ordinary magic, and honestly guys, Fern is exactly what Bruce Lee feared. She has mastered one attack 10,000 times. Ubel's been forced into a corner by Werble, but because he doesn't kill her immediately, Fern shows up and that's it. Checkmate. Fern's party wins. The smartass also wins against his opponent. Sadly, it's over for Werble's team, but is it? As they're walking away with a defeated expression on their faces, reminiscing about their reasons for becoming first-class mages, they conveniently come across a Still. Meanwhile, Frieren's Still is caught by a member of Denkin's party who could use teleportation. Her name is Laufin. As for the 3rd member of Denkin's party, he is Richter, and he's planning on killing either Lawine or Kane because that would disqualify Frieren right there and then. Denkin tells him that the first-class mage title is not worth killing young girls over, but even so, he's planning on killing one of them. He doesn't care if he has to kill, he'll do whatever it takes to get the title, because anyone who achieves the first-class title can be granted any spell of their choice by the leader of the Continental Mages Association. And who was the leader of this association? It's an elf named Siri. It turns out Frieren and Siri have a little bit of history together. Her master, Flom, was actually Siri's disciple, although Frieren and Siri don't get along because she isn't ambitious like Siri wants her to be. Now we also learn that Flom told Siri that Frieren will one day defeat the Demon King. And guys, that was 1,000 years ago. Coming back to the present, Frieren baits Laufin into giving up her location by threatening to kill Denkin. This allows Frieren to retrieve the bird, but it's not over yet. Richter can still kill the girls, but don't worry, Frieren still has a plan. She shocks everyone by straight up destroying Siri's impenetrable barrier. Or I guess now it was just a barrier. Why though? It's to allow the rain to come inside the area. Frieren knew that Richter would no longer be able to defeat the girls because Kane is fluent in water magic. She easily defeats him, and with that, Frieren's party has pretty much cleared the first stage. Apparently, Denkin's party also manages to win by forcefully taking a still from a party that had lost one of their members. The exam ends with 6 parties successfully clearing the first stage. We have Frieren's party, Denkin's party, Fern's party, and 3 more extras, if you will. The second stage will take place in 3 days, so it looks like everyone has some time to relax. Frieren, Fern, and Stark all visit an old restaurant to cheer up Fern, who's in a bad mood. Denkin's party members also end up at the same restaurant, while Ubel has a somewhat casual face-off with Land, and they end up at the restaurant as well. We see a flashback where Himmel and the others also once ate at this same restaurant, and then Frieren notes that the food now tastes even better than it did 80 years ago. The following day, Frieren and the others step out to get some snacks, and they meet Lawi and Kane at the bakery. Next, they're all walking together when Werble pulls up and takes Stark with him for some monster hunting. Fern doesn't mind at all, for some reason, though it's worth noting that Werble didn't have any ill will. Later, Lawine and Kane thank Frieren for helping them pass the first stage. They also give Frieren some hand-baked goodies. This makes Frieren recall how Himmel once said that if you can change someone's life, even just a little bit, they'll continue to remember you for a long time. Anyway, enough with the wholesome scenes. It's time for the second stage, as things are already not looking good because their proctor is a lady named Sense. It's said that Sense has never, not even once, passed anyone who has ever taken her tests. What is the test going to be about though? Apparently it's pretty straightforward. The participants have to reach the bottom of the King's Tomb dungeon. Sense tells them that all they need to do is reach the bottom, and she also gives them each a bottle. As it turns out, Sense is a pacifist. She doesn't want them to die, and that's why if they feel like they can't continue in the exam, they can just break that bottle and a golem will appear who will take them to safety. Now, since this doesn't involve any fighting between participants, Denkin suggests working together. However, not everyone is amused by the idea. Frieren and Fern enter the dungeon together. Sense follows along. She'll participate too, but of course she's not going to help. Sense also asks Fern about why she's a mage, because unlike the others, she can't sense any ambition in her. Fern explains that she just likes to see Frieren happy, and magic makes Frieren happy. Now, one thing everyone soon realizes about this dungeon is how there are replicas of them all just wandering around all over the dungeon. These are perfect copies of themselves. They can use magic, and they also have the same fighting style, even the same personality when it comes to combat. Denkin and the others manage to defeat Laufin's replica, but it looks like they can't proceed because guess who's waiting for them all in the next room? It's Frieren's replica. Meanwhile, Ubel and Land find themselves cornered by Ubel's replica. They have to work together to turn the situation around, but luckily, they succeed and destroy Ubel's replica. Going back to Frieren, Fern, and Sense, they reach the same spot where Denkin and the others are lying in wait. Everyone discusses if there's a method they can use to defeat Frieren's replica, but apparently they can't. She's immune to restraint magic and can resist hypnosis as well. Now then, what to do? By the way, what about Sense's replica? She's a first-class mage, so of course her replica is insanely strong too. Well, we see a girl named Edel's party try to fight the replica, but they're ridiculously outmatched. Edel ends up breaking her bottle to escape to safety while the other two retreat upon her orders. Then there's Werble's party. They have destroyed their own replicas by choosing matchups that were favorable to them, so it does look like they've been doing good. But then, again, there's still so many replicas left. Denkin and everyone wonder if their only choice to win against Frieren is brute force, but this is where Fern suggests something interesting. She declares that with some help, she can kill Frieren's replica. Lawine and Kane also arrive at the scene. They explain that the one behind these replicas is Spiegel, and unfortunately, they don't have any unique weakness at all. They also have no choice but to destroy Frieren's replica because Spiegel is hiding behind the door that Frieren's replica is guarding. Now, about Fern's plan to defeat Frieren. She explains that Frieren does have a weakness. As it turns out, Frieren cannot detect mana when she's casting a spell. This surprises everyone, because nobody expected Frieren to have such an amateurish weakness. Anyway, it's decided that Fern and Frieren will deal with Frieren's replica, while everyone else will guard the place from other replicas. This is the most efficient way, because if all of them attack Frieren's replica, it'll become too chaotic and some people might die. The fight begins and Frieren is eventually matched with her replica. Frieren creates an opening which allows Fern to hit Frieren with her usual attack. Suddenly we also see a flashback. After Flom's death, Frieren gives Siri a will. It's from Flom, and it's about how she managed to convince the human emperor to introduce humans to the idea of learning magic. This makes Siri realize that this development will kickstart the era of humans, and who knows, maybe in the future there will be mages who surpass elves like Siri and Frieren. And this flashback happens at the same time when Fern hits Frieren's replica with her full power, ordinary attack. Though, to be fair, Frieren's replica survives. Well, it was supposed to be a battle of attrition after all. In the meantime, Duncan and the others start eliminating other replicas. Lawine and Richter work together to defeat the replicas of Kane and Lawine, but unfortunately they're caught off guard by Sense's replica. She straight up impales their bodies and leaves them with no choice but to break their bottles. Soon, Duncan, Land, and Ubel show up to the scene and start thinking about how they should deal with Sense's replica. And guess what? Ubel declares that she can beat Sense herself. We see a brief flashback of the last time Ubel took part in the Mage exam. It was pretty simple. The participants had to push the first-class mage named Berg. They literally had to make him budge, but none of them were able to do it. That is until Ubel herself entered the chat. And guys, she just straight up cuts the mage in half. She kills him with a single slash. Of course, she gets disqualified because of it, but this was a testament to Ubel's strength. If she can visualize cutting you, she also can cut you in real life. And with that, Denkin and Land watch as Ubel easily cuts off Sense's hair. She just casually defeats Sense's replica. It ends as quickly as it begins, and looks like Sense knew she wouldn't be able to win against Ubel. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long before everyone starts running into resurrected replicas. This means that the only way is to defeat Spiggle, which means they can only buy time until Frieren and Fern take care of Frieren's replica. Frieren once again creates an opening by using her own personality against her replica. But even though Fern succeeds in landing a lethal attack, the battle doesn't end. Frieren's replica uses telepathy to send Fern flying, but ultimately Frieren succeeds in destroying her own replica. She then kills Spiggle, and all the replicas come to an end. Everyone who is still around reaches the bottom and passes the exam. Sense congratulates them all. Moving on, Stark notices Fern pouting right after he's done with a lesson from a mysterious elderly man. So what's up? Why is Fern upset now? Apparently her staff broke during the battle with Frieren's replica, and Frieren just told her to replace it without even considering her feelings. Well, the staff was a gift from Hader. She can't give up on it just because it broke. Meanwhile, Frieren pulls up to Richter's shop with the broken staff. The man's already having a bad day because he couldn't pass the second part of the exam, and Frieren ruins his day even further by having him repair the staff. You could probably imagine how pleased Fern must have been to see her staff fully repaired, just lying on the bed. Frieren is already asleep, but Fern looks as though she's finally realized just how much Frieren cares about her. Finally, the third stage of the exam begins, and the one proctoring it will be Siri herself. She knows that plenty of undeserving participants have survived the second exam thanks to Frieren, but that's all about to change now because she will personally be conducting one-on-one interviews with each participant. And that's exactly what happens. Kane enters the room and Siri fails her for even looking at the girl. This makes Kane ask about the reason, and looks like it's because Kane herself doesn't see her as a first-class mage. Siri fails Laufin, Dunsty, and Sharf for pretty much the same reason. Next, it's Frieren's turn, and Siri fails her too. Well, Frieren knew Siri would fail her. She's using her intuition to decide who passes and who fails. But her intuition is always correct, and that's why she fails Frieren. Siri also criticizes her for still lacking ambition, and wonders how someone like her was able to defeat the Demon King. But then again, Frieren explains that it wasn't just her. It was the combined effort of her and her friends that allowed them to defeat the Demon King. She also adds that it was Flom's flower magic which resulted in her first meeting with Himmel and the others. Now, as Frieren's about to leave, she tells Siri that she won't be able to fail Fern. Fern enters the room and says something that immediately makes Siri ask her to be her apprentice. No kidding. When Fern comments that Siri's mana is fluctuating, Siri is taken aback. Fern isn't even scared of her. She just pointed out an objective fact about her mana, and this was enough to make Siri consider taking her up as an apprentice. Fern declines though. She declares that she is Frieren's apprentice, and just as Frieren said, Siri realizes that she has no choice but to pass Fern. After all, her instincts are always correct. Zenkin, Mothode, Werble, Land, and Ubel also have quite amusing interviews, and all of them manage to pass. Following the exam, Fern and Stark come across Denkin and Laufin at the bakery. They enjoy some sweets, and Denkin explains how his reasoning for becoming a first-class mage was to have one last visit to his hometown, which exists in the northern regions. He's had quite an eventful life, but he's a simple man. He lost his wife back in his 20s, and now he just wants to see his hometown again before he passes away. Werble notices Frieren and tells her about how Hero Himmel's example is the reason he doesn't mind helping out people with trivial things. He mentions this after helping a lady who had dropped her apples. In the evening, all the new first-class mages get a spell of their choice from Siri. And believe it or not, Fern just gets a spell that cleans clothes. Frieren pats her head because it was a good choice. And guys, now that the party has a first-class mage, it's time to continue their journey up to the north. Frieren's party is on its way out of the city through a bridge when Lawine and Kane approach them. Yeah, they've failed the exam, but they still thank Frieren for all of her help. They wish them well, and both parties bid farewell to each other. Fern notes that it was a surprisingly brief farewell, just like how it was with Sein. This takes us back to the past, where Frieren once asked the same question. Well, Himmel responded that as long as they continue on with their journey, they will meet again. And if a farewell is too tearful, a reunion would be rather awkward, wouldn't it? And so Frieren replies to Fern with the same sentence. Why isn't the farewell more thoughtful? It's because it would make it embarrassing when they meet again. This is where the first season of Frieren Beyond Journey's End concludes. And I know you don't need me to tell you that it has been one hell of an anime so far. So come on, let's talk about it. Tell me what you think of Frieren and her bizarre adventures. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.